Now I want to give the floor to Feline. Feline is our writer from Belize. She is the president of the Belizean organi- Organization of Authors. This is the only presentation that we will have. Feline. Feline is going to talk about public lending right and access to the digital market. These topics are very important in Latin America, and we have not discussed them yet. So welcome, Feline. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your kind introduction. And as the speakers were speaking, of course, there were certain points that stood out to me, and I want to now extend my presentation, but we don't have enough time. But they may come up. But they were specifically in regards to legislation, and so this is the author experience in Belize. Belize is a Caribbean country in Central America. The country's multi-ethnic population estimated at 419,199 people in July 2020 speak English as a national language, trace their primary roots to Mesoamerica and Africa, and gained independence from the British Empire in 1981. Socially and historically, this makes Belize a stepchild of Latin America. The At the same time, um, while sharing borders with Mexico and Guatemala, we are the stepchild geographically, though, based on having to travel through Mexico or Miami to reach any other Caribbean nation. Belize is also a stepchild of the Caribbean. According to the Statistical Institute of Belize, 53% of the population of Belize in 2019 were mestizo or Hispanic. Despite this, in 2018 and 2019, out of the 52 books published or made available in Belize, only two, and these are by Belizean authors or about Belize, only two were in Spanish. The Belizean Writers Guild was established in 2014 to address the low quantity. At that time, in the year 2014, there were only two novels and 13 nonfiction books published by or about Belize or Belizeans, and inconsistent quality of fiction and creative nonfiction books published in Belize. The aim was to equip authors to have a high standard of work that would make it easy to reach Caribbean, Latin American, and North American markets. The majority of the publishing activity in Belize happens independently, locally, in print, and is limited when it comes to sales within Belize. And these are more paperback books that I'm referring to. The average initial print run is 100 to 500 copies, with rare subsequent printings since they are self funded. Outside of the academic system, there is really no marketplace for books. If a school doesn't pick up an author's book and they don't have a good personal marketing strategy to reach each retail outlet, the book is never mentioned after its launch. And I should mention here that we don't really have bookstores. We have retail locations that may sell books. The resources, both financial and technical, to keep pushing a book after it is published are simply not there. If the publication is well received or used in schools, as mentioned earlier, there may be second printings for these independent publishers. Belizean authors have gained entry into literary circles in the Caribbean and Central America through their own networking efforts and online visibility. So, through that connection, different authors have been able to attend festivals and been included in some anthologies. There are only four consistent publishers of literature in the country, which primarily publish nonfiction books. The four traditional publishers tend to publish between 1,000 to 3,000 copies in the first edition. Within the past 5 years, more Belizeans and Belizean Americans have published ebooks through Amazon mostly, sometimes in addition to having paperback editions self-published within the country. The barriers authors experience with publishing through Amazon is that the process requires getting credit cards to then set up a PayPal account. This limits the number of persons who can use this service to Belizean authors who have lived abroad, who have some type of connection um, with persons living abroad, or who have the means to maintain a credit card. The majority of Belizean authors don't. This is hardly a generation divide with authors in some aspects. Young and old use Facebook as their main platform, and few have their own website. The Belize National Library Service and Information System has 46 branch and community libraries across the country in rural and urban areas. When the budget allows, a copy of a newly published Belizean book is purchased for all libraries after the legal deposit mandate of 2 copies are donated by the author. These books are then available at the libraries as reference books, which are not for lending. Due to the reasons above, small local market, barriers to accessing the digital market, and non-circulating access at libraries, public lending right, or PLR, is of high interest for Belizean authors. Having a PLR system would mean that financial compensation for writing and publishing would extend beyond the number of copies sold, which, as mentioned earlier, is somewhere between 1 to 500 copies in that first instance. Only the few authors whose works are published by the 4 consistent publishers in the country receive any exposure, possibility of a second edition, and residual income. While there is a reproduction rights organization for authors and illustrators, Belize Copyright Licensing Agency, there is no licensing activity yet. With all that was stated, multiple opportunities exist for this generation and the next. Collective advocacy through creating a platform for Belizean books would remove the most evident barriers to digital markets. Public lending right would increase the economic shelf life of local books, and strengthening the reproduction rights organization would give authors more protection for their work and access to international markets. Through these activities combined, Belizean authors could see a return on their investment from self publishing and possibly have enough to reprint or print more than 1 to 500 copies. The major benefit of having so many independent authors has exactly what Katie had mentioned earlier, which is it has to do with the diversity of voices. You know, there is not a we cannot say that there's only one voice coming through because people find ways to publish their work. And that is one thing that we are fortunate for is that diversity of voices that reflect the people who live here and the ideas herein. But it would be one step more if we can increase the quantity and the quality. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Felín. Eh,
Thank you, Feline. Undoubtedly, there's lots of material to discuss. The public lending right, as I said before, this is a right, although it is part of some Latin American legislations, it's a right that it does not exist, is in the closet. We don't have information about it. Authors do not know it, and authorities, governments in general, didn't allow a discussion about this because this false argument regarding the fact that this right may be against the right to access knowledge and culture. So I believe this is one of the topic that should be part of our discussions in the following years. And regarding access to the digital market, what occurs in Belize is what happens in the rest of the countries as well. Many authors have become their own publishers, not only their own publishers, but their own promoters. They have to learn about marketing, about design. They become like an orchestra of authors. So an initiative to think about collective platforms, that's very attractive for the region. Thank you once again, Feline. And now I will give the floor to Jorge, who's a Mexican author and left-handed author. He will talk about his rights and what authors think about author rights. Go ahead, Carlos. Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Hello to everyone. I'm pleased to be part of this forum. And I've said that I was going to talk about my rights as a left-handed author, just as a metaphor of the the gap between our work as writers. I write with my left hand on paper, but sometimes with my right hand, I read in the modern way, finding PDFs online or using Kindle, buying books in Amazon, and my right hand does not know what the left hand does. We are not aware sometimes as readers of what writers live. We are living a crisis now. The figures are frightening and threatening what Luke mentioned regarding authors' income. So I believe that we need to be aware as authors and through the International Authors Forum, but also through our local forums to discuss these issues. In Mexico, Fernanda Macho, one author, was complaining in social media about the PDFs of her books that were being distributed online and freely. And she was attacked. She received criticism from the readers. They felt they were affected because she was complaining. So clearly, we have a serious cultural issue that we need to address. And probably the solution is not just defending the traditional book sale, but through s- innovative strategies such as public lending rights. I could take advantage to discuss this. I want to know how can we translate public lending rights or material objects, books that are lent to the digital world, where lending would have a different dynamic that I do not understand yet. Another thing I'd like to mention is that I started being part of the International Authors Forum thanks to the conversations with Katie. This made me think about rights and taking into account all the topics that we have discussed, I realized she was interested in listening my experience as an author to translate it to the forums, and that made me think about this topic. And it's going to be great for us in Mexico to replicate these experiences, especially paradoxically through a global institution, we will be able to rethink the regional situation. This is something that really worries me, and I'm glad to be part of a Latin American event in Mexico. In many ways, is closest to the US than the rest of Latin America, and I think that make us culturally poor. So a meeting like this with the rest of Latin America will be useful to rethink new topics and, as we have said here, to establish a future agenda that is related particularly to the challenges posed by globalization. The globalization is behind this global phenomena of a decline in authors' income. So we have to see how we're going to face this, how we are going to foster the economic structures at a local level. For example, I think there's a discussion regarding global sales in Latin America. This creates colonialistic practices There are Spanish publishing houses that control the dissemination of works from one country to the other in the Hispanic world. So another idea that we need to address in order to create a living is that the royalty payment system in the case of writers that is associated with books exclusively should be expanded to other ways of expressions, especially through the network. For example, royalties by published article in magazines, newspapers, internet platforms, and authors are not strictly, for example, not through payment in advance, but through royalties. One of the things I want to highlight is that the IAF has helped me move forward, and for the future agenda, I propose opening discussions for with the industry, with readers representatives that maybe reviewers, publishers. I think that will be very useful apart from organizing ourselves as creators, as authors to get related with other sectors that are part of the creative industry. So thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really looking forward to listening the rest of the participants and keep discussing in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. You're mentioning very interesting things. And yes, we need to include this and to deal with these things. For example, the thing that you were saying regarding royalties is something that it's very interesting. It's something that we have not explored. Everything that had to do with public lending in content. It would be good to learn about what is happening in Europe. Um, for example, public lending in digital content in Europe, also the relationship with other industries. We have not only publishers, but also we have audiovisual authors. So in the next meeting, we will establish a work agenda and maybe we can include all these things and we welcome all the options. I remind you that we have a very, very little time, so please present in only 4 or 5 minutes. Carlos, welcome. Go ahead. Thank you, Maria Fernanda, for your presentation. Thank you for the assistance, also for the IAF, for for inviting me today. In some way or somehow, I consider myself as an ally. We've been working together on several things. I would like for my presentation to be as natural as possible because that is the way in which an author is born, especially when a written work author. The person that wants to become a writer learns about the literary practice, he or she finds itself. For example, this happens through a literary community or a mentor. That was my case. After that, you strengthen your role as an author because there is a strong uh, vocation that's or a strong mandate that survives even in hostile environments. And if you try to understand copyright and so on, sometimes even participation in a competition, if you are ready for that, is because your mandate helps you to see the light, to be able to thrive in spite of all the shadows. And that is the story of myself. And I said that is a story of all Central American authors. I work with several groups in order to be able to find my way and to be able to find a way of living. And I have the idea that authors from Central America are always stuck with or have issues regarding the distribution of books. We are always discussing the same issue, even in Costa Rica or Panama. It's very difficult for us to be read outside, for our books to go beyond our borders. And usually authors do not consider distribution as something within their jurisdiction or their power. Uh, I'm atypical because most of the authors believe that they should concentrate only on their creative efforts. And we ignore something that affects us a lot. So we need to change this. Traditionally, articles or works arrive to bookstores in a mysterious way, something that we do not know about. Of course, our works need to be protected by copyright, but most of the authors do not know much about copyright either. So therefore, we have public presentations and public readers in order to attract readers. That is the traditional way of carrying out this titanic task of distributing the books. But we know that there are other authors that are able to do this with few resources. We could use an online register to place our work on an internet platform. We can use digital ads that are very economical that promote selling our books all around the world. So the tools are there, but just a few authors use them. And then we had the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID puts us outside our comfort zone. The normal as we knew it does not exist. I do not agree with normal or the new normal because it's no longer normal. It's something different. Among the measures that seems to be here to stay is social distancing, and that affects the logistic through which books travel, public readers, and public appearances. The COVID imposed a change. So, how do we adapt to this? This could be the end of the tiresome issue of distribution. So, we need to take into consideration ebooks that are accessible for everyone in the planet. And we need to take into consideration on demand print systems that help us print a book at a time. So these systems are waiting for brave Central America authors that are ready to implement these systems. On the other side, you have European, African, and Central American authors ready to read these books through a click. I quote this from Buy Negocios. They are from Argentina and they show how the ebook during the pandemic replaced traditional books or physical books. We need to take into consideration the human nature of the transaction that is not going to change. So, because at the end of the transaction, at each end, there will be a community. We will need the publishers because they will give us the other perspective in order to be able to be objective or to have an objective literary opinion. But it's important to take into consideration the creators and the consumers of that creation. All of them will be the most important community. And the forum will be the space in which we are able to meet. Creation is something that is born within human beings and is for human beings. So taking into consideration that essence, we need to use the new tools and we could work together. And we should have copyright to take care of our works. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to work together. And also, the Fundación or Foundation for Art Management that is connected with the IAF is reorganizing itself so many authors can become part of the organization and so that we can establish a network of organizations. So I have exhausted my 5 minutes, so we are here to listen or to your questions. Thank you, Carlos. Yes, I think you did it in less than 5 minutes. We have a lot of questions. Please, I ask the speakers to answer them. We will try to answer all the questions towards the end of this round of presentations. So those speakers who are able to answer the questions, please, we beg you to do it. Now I will give the floor to Deborah Mondani. Deborah is a member of the Argentine Writers Union. Deborah will be talking on copyright and cultural diversity, a pending account. Welcome, Deborah. You can go ahead. Hello, good afternoon. And to start with, I would like to thank everyone. I would like to thank the IAF for creating this forum and this session that includes all of us. I prepared a presentation, I can share it, and if not, I can just present as you prefer. You tell me, Fernanda, what do you prefer? You can do what you like. If you want to share it, it's fine. Let's see if it works. Can you see it? Great. So, as Fernanda was saying, the goal is to talk about two aspects that have already been discussed by some of the presenters here. That there is a great connection between copyright and cultural diversity. And that's why in the Argentine Writers Union, I am a vocal for union issues. We think that we have something pending here. By taking into consideration what other colleagues were saying, we are having a change of paradigm because once and for all, writers should be convinced in order to be able to claim things in society because we are writers. This is an idea that has been discussed for many years, at least from the beginning or from the 19th century. So it's important that creators should be considered as workers. And because as we have not been considered as workers, our work is not considered work. So that's why this appeals to us, because we need to be able to see ourselves as workers. I would like to talk about two things. On one side, cultural diversity and then copyright, because they are connected. Why we talk about cultural diversity? Because we believe that cultural diversity is necessary. If we talk about cultural diversity, we need to consider the plurality of voices. And why we are saying this? Because we think that to write or writing should not be a luxury, or working in plastic arts shouldn't be a luxury. But if our resources are not covered, if we are not able to charge for the things that we do, only a few people that have those minimal needs covered can work in writing. And therefore, cultural diversity is at risk. If I'm not wrong, Katie talked about this, Luke talked about this when he talked about the barrier to creative work by taking into consideration the material conditions of writers. As you can see here, there are several treaties, international treaties and pacts that put emphasis on cultural diversity. For example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity of UNESCO, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the Pact of San Jose of Costa Rica. So in all these international treaties, it is indicated that all cultures should have their right to express themselves guaranteed, and all persons should have the right to the protection of their moral and material interests because of their work, literally scientific and art productions. Now, this right is one of the rights that are most violated. Of course, here we are talking about this today. I would like to talk about the other aspect that we consider key and is copyright. And again, here I will repeat what we were saying. In a scenario where cultural industries are changing with a new field or playing field, especially regarding digital contents, when these contents and their circulation we cannot stop it. It's necessary to discuss the reasoning behind the rights of creation. But be careful, because there is something that is very important, and is how we, as actors within the cultural field, we need to promote democratization and access to cultural goods. In Argentina, since the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a PDF gate in a way, and it was very good because there was a great debate between writers, and we all participated on social media or in mass media, and we were discussing what this circulation of PDF implies. And I think that the problem is not for people to have access to this material, but we need to think something that we have already discussed and that was already mentioned. We need to take into consideration everything that has to do with public landing right. Sorry. I was saying that as vocal of union issues, my team and I thought about contracts. We would like to see the document that you were talking about, those 10 principles that should be included in contracts. So maybe we could include those in our work in Argentina, for example. Sorry, but there is a problem. Here we have all the points. I don't want to mention many things, but for example, when a contract is held, there should be a termination date, advance payments should be there, and it should be mandatory when signing a contract. Many publishing houses here do not pay advance payments, and they pay copyright when they can. We need to review some clauses, especially everything that has to do with all languages and for every platform. This should be something that needs to be negotiated, and not as a fight or a controversy with publishing houses. But if a publishing house is not present in another country, why should I give them my rights or the rights of my work in that other country? Everything that has to do with paying rights based on the price of sale of the book, because sometimes what happens, there is a problem there because we are not partners of the publishing house. We are not just providing the raw material. So we think about the urgent need to have cultural policies that protect cultural diversity and the plurality of voices, but also support and foster the creative process. So those are the points in order to open the discussion. There is a lot to be discussed, of course. From the Argentine Writers Union, we are working on all this. We think that it's key to have this Latin American forum in order to be able to discuss together the best way to be followed in the future by protecting copyright and the situation of authors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. We are all in the same situation, in the same line, contracts. We need to work on that. They have already shared in the chat box the 10 principles, but we will send it to you so you have them, so that all your organizations have them. So I will now give the floor to Gabriel. Welcome, Gabriel. Go ahead. Hello, Fernanda. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for the invitation. On behalf of the Argentine of Association of Translators and Interpreters, as part of the Commission of Native Languages, the situation here in Argentina and in Latin America is quite different than the one discussed in this forum and in other on any kind of discussion regarding the distribution of rights. It's quite left behind regarding vindications. We have discussed minority languages, but what happens in my country, in other countries of Latin America, there's a marginalization of populations that have not only been at colonized, but also now at the present times. So today it's very hard to talk about writing because these peoples have been deprived of the right to writing, the right to language. We need the right of peoples, of persons to express themselves. Persons are not able to express themselves in their native language because they have not received education. So, in economic terms, the work that we carry out is to vindicate, and this comes before capitalism. This can be understood. This is something that we bear in mind. The fact that there are so many violations and harassment suffered by native peoples, Quechua, Guarani in Argentina, regarding economic rights, xenophobia, what happens in the provinces in the north, Chaco, every month, Quom adolescent dies because of repression or police repression. We could discuss translation or writing in native languages, but in spite of that, in the association, the AATI, we've been carrying out the task of fostering this knowledge, saying, speaking in one language grants rights. If the Quechua speaking person in Santiago del Estero needs to speak Spanish because that is what capitalism in the region imposes. So, our work, taking that into account, is to achieve that those native language speakers can start having a fair income or and speaking their languages. So in the associations, we've been working with interpreters within the judicial system so that they can work within the different provinces, and also regarding writing, we've been following up this and fostering the possibility of creating a collection. I'm talking about possibility because the concept of literature is Western, is a collection in which we can publish different works in native languages, Quechua, Guarani, Quiachu, which is a language from the Patagonia, with a fair retribution for the work. We've been working with publishing houses from universities because the private sector is not that open to these proposals. These authors now are able to have fair contracts, and we've been able to achieve also a relation between translators and authors. Sometimes the authors are translate themselves, but in some cases we have translators working, and this has enabled us to guarantee their rights. Deborah was mentioning this clause about all languages. You can imagine native language writers that need to be translated to reach markets. So that's our dissemination work, so that works can be published in their native languages and then be translated into Spanish. I think that's all I wanted to say. I want to thank you for this invitation. I wanted to be brief. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gabriel. You've been brief and very precise. It's been very interesting to listen what's the situation of translators of native languages. I will now give the floor to Mark, who is also a translator, and then Polly will finish so we can save up time. So Mark, go ahead. Thank you, Fernanda. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I think that you will listen to me and you will see that many things have been said before. I'm going to be focused especially on the work carried out by literary translators in Mexico. We know that in Mexico, books are illustrated, translated, written. They- This has been done for 400 years, but working conditions for almost all parties in this industry are really bad, unfair, and precarious. Specifically, when we talk about working conditions for literary translators, if we ask them what's their experience, we will find that usually they face these situations. For example, a translator finishes a translation, and after months or years, he is not able to receive any royalties for that. Also, the translation may be published, the translator never gets to know that the translation is published. Sometimes it is printed and his name credits are not included, not on the cover or inside the book. Also, sometimes the translator translates a very famous work, a TV series, a movie, a play is done using that translation, and the translator is not recognized, he is not informed, and the translator, of course, does not receive royalties of those other products. Also, it may happen that they finish um, a translator. The translator is presented at a fair, and the translator gets to know that because he reads that in the fair agenda. But he's not notified about the presentation of his work. It may also happen that publishers or they make modifications, changes to the translator without having the approval of the translator, and he's not even notified about these changes. The translator gets to know about this once the book is printed. It may also happen that a translator wants to translate an author he has worked a lot on, but he finds out that he cannot access copyrights because there's a different publishing house in another region, different country, a different part of the world has the exclusive rights for the translation of that work. It may also happen that a different publishing house publishes the same translation. Sometimes the translator starts working on a publishing house and the translator doesn't get to know about this. The translator is considered as someone who provides a service. He cannot ask for royalties. He's not considered an author. All these actions are part of what we call bad publishing practices, denying the condition of author, of a translator, and also the federal legislation for authors' rights does not recognize them, and also there is a lack of representation from the unions. All these bad practices and situations that affect working conditions for translators exist. They are possible because there has been a lack of communication between publishing houses and translators, but also the legislation is quite new. The organization representing translators is also new. However, taking this into account, AMETLI the, is created in 2016 in Mexico to represent, defend, and guarantee translators' rights to be part of a guild. The challenges that we face, what we try to address, are all these injustices. And Ahmedli has carried out different actions to face this situation. For example, firstly, we have created a contract, all these practices that I have mentioned before. Most translators work without a contract, just with an agreement that may be informal, in an oral way, by email. They ask us to translate a work, and we don't know under which circumstances we're going to work. And we accept that because we need to get the money to pay the bills. Ametli has written a contract that all colleagues can download, whether they are members of the association or not. It's in the ametli.org website. That contract establishes mm, copyright. It guarantees the acknowledgement of the translator as an author. It proposes payment installments. Katie was mentioning some of these principles. This guide or contract developed by Admetli covers most of them. Another action carried out by Admetli to deal with this situation is offering legal advisory for their members, and also it fosters professionalization of translation. To do that, there's a degree in humanistic and literary translation, in which there is a subject about copyright. Not, it's very important to be aware, to be educated in this area. And another action done by Ametli is to foster the awareness, the visibility. Is important for translators to know the rights, try to negotiate them, try to get better contracts. But it is also important to be for them to be acknowledged as an important part of this chain of this industry, and that they are recognized as authors of their translations. They have to make their work visible, to acknowledge the difficulty, the expertise required for the job. That's why we have a campaign in social networks, in social media, in which we try to communicate the best ways of giving us credits, of naming us. We also offer videos about the translator's job, and we have a cycle of different conversations in which a member of a medley, a translator, talks about his or her experience, the work that that translator has translated, and it's a way of getting closer to the readers so that readers get to know their work. We need to give the floor to Polly now, but I want to say that there's a long way ahead. We need to create these spaces to discuss rights, to find spaces to discuss with writers, with publishing houses, and keep working jointly. So thank you so much, and I give the floor to Polly.
Thank you, Mar. Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Hello, everyone. I would like to share my screen to show you my presentation. Let me know if you can see it. It's great. I'm not seeing it. I'm a professional illustrator. I've been working for 20 years, and it took me a long time to understand what being an author means. I'm still learning some things because illustrators, those who work with pictures, graphic artists, and audiovisual artists are also authors. There is no education regarding this. And as everything that is artwork is not considered a work, sometimes it's difficult to for us to live of artwork. Unlike writers or composers, visual artists and translators are still fighting to be considered as workers. Because of what has happened in recent decades, we've been able to move forward, to advance on this. 15 years ago, in a book, for example, the illustrator name was not on the cover. Sometimes the customers had parts of the book or even pages of the comics because they were buying those pictures or those images for them, they were given right to exploit them. In spite of having able to advance on through small battles and in a cultural market that is changing all the time, there is a long way ahead in order to educate authors and also producers and publishers and also government and also consumers, including readers and spectators and players. A concrete example in the publishing sector occurs when publishers and literature experts and even fair organizers across the world use the word author to talk about writers only, excluding illustrators and translators. Socially, they made the word author and writer synonyms. Audiovisual artists and graphic artists are involved in a huge supply chain. We are present in almost all the industries, and that makes us invisible sometimes. In the publishing sector, graphic, media, or education, through illustrations or pictures or designs, comics, graphic humor, infographs, and even typographs. We are everywhere. In the audiovisual world, we are parents of film, advertising, music, games and video games, storyboards, concept art, design of characters and brand, 3D modeling, visual effects, animation. We are also present in illustration applied to books, objects, and also textiles. As I said, we are part of a creative industry, and it's difficult to determine who should live out of a royalty because many of us work with a permanent contract or in a permanent job. Sometimes some of us work in studios or production companies. Unfortunately, many people are working as freelancers in an informal way. So there is lack of information, lack of protection of copyright, and there are were very bad working conditions with contracts and competitions that are abusive, that are a way of uh, making the industry more precarious. So it's important that we protect these workers so that they continue to grow. But many of the actors, because of economic reasons, would like to include in the same place freelancers and those who have a permanent job. We are not simply service providers, we are content creators, and therefore the rules need to be clear, especially when it comes to the orange economy market. Also, the fact that graphic artists are authors, this doesn't mean that we are competing for our rights with writers or with translators or we are the other authors. They have tried to make us compete in recent times. For example, writers have had the responsibility of giving away some of their rights to us, even though the product is different. So, we need to have a discussion in order to create a front that includes all the authors, in order to be able to change the current business model without intermediaries, so that those that are independent workers or small size companies are able to compete with monopolies and corporations and to have a fair treatment. We need to make some voices more visible so they are able to face those algorithms that are imposed and that go against the democratization of content so that they are diverse, universal, and inclusive. We are thankful for the IAF to include us and to let us know participate in this session. We are very interested and we would like to share and knowledge so that we are able to defend our rights together and exercise our rights as authors. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mar. Thank you very much, Polly. We have had a very fruitful conversation because we have gone through all the areas that are related to the production of books, but also with other sectors. We have some few minutes left for some of the panelists to make any additional comments. We have some minutes. You can raise your hand. Otherwise, I will give the floor to John. Go ahead, Polly. Can you hear me? I was thinking in what we were just discussed is that we need to be together in this. And I was thinking about how important it is to have information of each of the countries. For example, in the ADA, we are an association. As all the other organizations, we provide advice services. We try to foster our profession, but there is a lack of information. As I was talking to you and with other colleagues, I learned about things like, I'm not remembering the name right now. I know that there is a quota. You know what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? Like universal fee. Oh, so you're talking about licenses. Yes, there is a comment on the chat made by Nicolas. I think you can say there. And yes, we have all this lack of information regarding what is happening in other continents, the legislation that is effective there. So we need to have all that information, to have a portal so that everyone is able to share the news in each country in order to see what is going to happen in the future or with what could happen. Because, for example, the United States are always first to violate some rights. So be careful. Don't let your governments to move forward in that direction because it will affect you. So, and also we can also share the achievements. Thank you, Polly. Effectively, this is all about that. To have these proposals, for example, a common space where we can upload information about what is happening or what will happen. There is a question for you, Mar, on the Q&A. And it is if there is a document about these bad practices that you were talking about, especially regarding what happens with translators. And I think that is something that Argentine and Colombian translators are also facing. Yes, I don't think that we have a document as such. The Mexican Association of Literary Translators do not have that document where, or a document that compiles all the bad practices, but we can draft it. We do have a file with a contract help. And if you go to the website and you go to that part of the website, I think it's called the ABC of good practices or best practices. You can give information on the bad practices that you have faced, and you can send also an email to the secretariat where you can require information about those bad practices and also regarding best practices. But we don't have a document as such that is public regarding bad practices. So now you have homework, you need to prepare it. you need to prepare an international fund where we can upload other bad practices. Celine, Carlos, anything that you would like to add? I know that this that we've been discussing goes from Mexico to Argentina, and maybe John can also say something regarding what we've talked so far, if this is happening in Canada. One more thing, Maria Fernanda. I was talking about the fee per private copy. This is something that several countries in Europe have. We can talk about this also.
Well,
Anyone else would like to
yes,
make any comments?
Feline here. I just wanted to,
Feline, go ahead first.
all right, I just wanted to speak about just about the changes in copyright that will take place. We're also looking at copyright reform in the first quarter of the year. So that's something that the authors are looking at along with the Intellectual Property Office. So for example, the Marrakesh Treaty, the Belize signed onto it in, I want to say maybe 2018, and none of our works though have been in compliance with that since then. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. But it was stated as well earlier that authors' rights and even compliance to some of these international treaties require money, not just the interest, but also the funding. So that is where we fall behind.
Sí, y eso nos pasa a todos. Carlos.
Yes, and that happens everywhere. Carlos, you can go ahead. I just like to make emphasis on something that I consider essential and that lies behind the whole discussion. When Gutenberg's printing machine was created, literature of people sitting around a manuscript was going to disappear, and that will have a disastrous effect on human beings. This happened some years ago, and with the new technologies and with the ebook and on-demand print, it's also happening. We have these risks, but literature does not depend on a support. We have some symbols or signs that create words. And literature is a very human phenomenon. And that's why the forum is so important. Forum is made up of people. And while we extend the forum in Latin America, we need to look for a group of people that are connected and are able to create works in different ways. And we can create literature in different ways. That is what I would like to mention, because this is the value of the forum and of this initiative that allows to include everyone here, from John, Degan to all, and includes all of us here in Latin America. Thank you, Carlos. Because of time constraints, we need to close this meeting. We would like to continue discussing, but we have no possibility. John, can you make some closure remarks?
Sure. Thank you, Fernanda. And just since we were talking about copyright, let me just say from the Canadian perspective, watch out. Anytime there is a discussion of reform or modernization of copyright, that's usually code for weakening the rights of authors. Canada is the sort of the best worst example of that right now. Canadian authors had our copyright severely weakened under the banner of modernizing it, and that has meant hundreds of millions of dollars of lost income over the last 10 years. So that's the warning from up north here. This has been really it's so informative and wonderful to hear all of you. And I want to thank all of the panelists for telling us about your countries, about the disciplines you're working in, and your particular challenges. I think the information about translation was really something new to me, and maybe doesn't have the same outcomes in Canada right now, but very interesting to hear about the challenges. So thank you. I'm going to try to get all of you in, Feline and Jorge and Carlos and Deborah and Gabrielle, Mar, Polly, Katie, and Luke. I want to thank as well the translators who were fabulous, keeping up with all of us fast talkers. And finally, of course, to Fernanda for being such a wonderful and engaging host as she always is. I don't know if you've been to Canada, if you're aware, we're a gigantic, huge country geographically, and we have a relatively small population, which is a real challenge for my group, the Writers Union of Canada, in terms of bringing everybody together, bringing our membership together. And what we found is that the widespread adoption of this technology, of virtual and digital meetings like this over the last year, the sort of forced adoption of it has meant paradoxically that we're all so much more closely connected now with each other than before the pandemic. And I really hope it's the same for all of us on this call. And I'm looking at you, the Secretariat of the IAF, Luke and Thanasis, more of these meetings and discussions like this, please. So thank you very much, everyone. And back to you, Fernanda.
Muchas gracias, John. Y sí, ojalá podamos
Thank you,
tener
John. I hope we can have more events that allow us to understand the situation in our countries, to work better in the region. So I just want to thank all of you for your effort, enthusiasm, your time. Estefania and Maria have been great interpreters today. And I want to let you know that in the public we have other colleagues, Fabiana from Brazil, Medley, Mexican designers, Nicolas, visual artists from Argentina, Mateo in Colombia. So the next session on December the 1st, not we should be able to encourage associations in Uruguay, Chile, authors in Central America, Nicaragua to participate. They were interested in working in Central America, Costa Rica. We received message from the US, so let's create a synergy. Thank you for your trust in our work, the region that is hardworking, enthusiastic, full of solidarity, and rich. Thank you, Thanasis. He has been very strict about our times, but please turn on your camera so we can see you. And thank you. Thank you, Barbara, John, Katie. Thank you so much. See you on December the 1st. Help us spread the word and so that more people can join us. A huge hug to all of you. Take care. See you on December the 1st.